What I'm about to tell you still leaves me to question what is real and what's not. This happened to my dad and me, and even now, 2 years later, I get chills just thinking about it. I know how it sounds. If I were you, I wouldn't believe it, but I swear to you every word is true. 2 years ago, my dad and I traveled to go camping at a spot out in the deep country. We enjoyed doing this. It was always a nice way to get away from real life. This place in particular was a good spot. Hiking trails, zip lines, a bit touristy, but with deep history. Native American lands, you know. The first night there was perfect. Families at other campsites, campfires everywhere, kids laughing, the kind of peaceful night you go camping for. We cooked hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, cracked open a few beers, and made small talk with the people around us. A typical peaceful first night. The second night is when things started to change. The staff told us we were the only ones in the park. Nobody else had booked a site. At first we were excited, a whole campground to ourselves. It sounded peaceful. We spent the day hiking, fishing, taking it slow. At one point we listened to a scary podcast while sitting by the river, because why not lean into the spooky atmosphere? We thought we were being funny. By the time the sun started setting, we were feeling good, a little buzzed from the beers, tired in that satisfying way after a long day outdoors. We decided to head to the park's information center to charge our phones and grab some snacks before it got too dark. Then we walked back to our campsite. That's when the unease set in. The woods felt different. The air was heavier. The sky had this weird, tense twilight that didn't want to leave. My dad turned to me and said, "Doesn't this feel off? Like we're in some kind of dream?" And he was right. It did. The forest felt endless, stretching out in every direction. My chest got tight. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. We didn't say much after that, just kept walking, both of us glancing over our shoulders like we expected to see something lurking in the trees. Back at camp, we stayed close to the fire. We didn't really talk about the weird feeling. We didn't need to. It was like we both silently agreed to keep things normal, pretending nothing was wrong. We roasted marshmallows, played music, even smoked some weed to try and distract ourselves. Not the typical father-daughter moment you'd expect, but by the time the sun dipped below the trees, we could no longer see what was in front of us, except for the fire. That's when the uneasy feeling grew into something worse. As we sat by the campfire roasting s'mores, it was around 9. I think we heard a noise, a bang, as if a tree had fallen. It came out of nowhere, loud and close. It echoed through the woods from the direction of the river, maybe 100 yards away. We grabbed our flashlights and pointed them toward the sound. Nothing. No movement. No glowing eyes. Nothing. "Bigfoot," we joked, nervous laughs slipping out, but neither of us believed it. A few minutes passed. Then it came again, louder this time, farther off, but the same sound. Same weight. We shined our lights again, but the forest swallowed the beams, allowing us to see only the trees immediately surrounding our tent. Then the third bang, closer. That's when the fear hit. Whatever it was moving toward us, circling the campsite, deliberate, patient. And then, before we could collect our thoughts, the fourth bang, 20 yards away, maybe less. That's when the real fear set in. Whatever high I'd had from the weed was long gone. My dad turned to me, his eyes wide, and I saw the fear in his face. Real fear, the kind I'd never seen on him before. We agreed without words. We had to get in the tent. We scrambled, threw the last of the firewood onto the fire, hoping the flames would scare off whatever was out there. And then we rushed into the tent, leaving everything else behind. I ran inside and dropped flat to the ground. My dad followed, moving a little slower, right behind me. He was halfway in when the loudest bang happened. So close. The ground seemed to shake beneath us. My dad froze, still half outside the tent, staring out into the dark. I said his name, grabbed his attention, and he blinked, then threw himself inside, pulling the zipper down behind him. He muttered something. "It's standing there." "What's standing there?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. His voice was trembling. It was like a wall of darkness. He sat by the zipper, clutching the only weapon we had, a small knife. Useless, really. But it was all we had. Then came the vibration. A noise that is still hard to explain. It started low like a hum, but it wasn't just sound. It filled the air. It was a feeling inside us, making our chests tight, pressing against our ribs from the inside. I've never felt anything like it before, or since. My dad whispered, "You hear that?" I couldn't answer. I just nodded, too scared to make a sound. The feeling of being hunted, completely and utterly hunted. This went on for about 5 minutes as we sat in absolute silence, and then came another sound. It wasn't an animal, it wasn't human. It was this guttural, alien-like noise. The only way I can describe it is like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. Nothing I have ever heard before. Nothing that belonged to any category of sound I knew. We stayed frozen in that tent, too scared to breathe, too scared to move. I had a small mesh window right by where I was lying, but I refused to look through it. The fear of being seen of something on the other side looking back at me kept my face pressed into my sleeping bag. I just lay there trying to control my breathing while my dad sat with the knife, staring at the zipper. And then the strangest thing happened. In the middle of all of it, we blacked out. Neither of us remember trying to fall asleep. Neither of us made the decision to close our eyes. My dad was still clutching the knife when we woke up, lying in the middle of the tent. I came back to consciousness on my back in a panic, the overwhelming physical sensation that something had been standing over me. My first thought was my phone. I grabbed it to check the time. Dead. I asked my dad to check his. Dead, too. Both had been fully charged the night before. We stepped outside to look around, standing back to back 5 feet from the tent, still scared out of our minds. It was pitch black. Still the middle of the night. The air was cold and completely still. The food we'd left on the table was completely untouched. The fire we'd stoked before diving into the tent had burned all the way down to ash-cold ash, like it had been out for hours, like it had never been touched. The whole place felt wrong, like we shouldn't have been there, like we had never been meant to be there. We waited out the rest of the night in the tent without saying much, just trying to get some real sleep. When dawn finally came, we packed up in silence, not a word to each other until we were in the car with the doors locked and the engine running. Then we talked, and we realized we'd both felt the exact same thing that entire night. Watched, hunted, like something had been waiting patiently for us to slip up. We told my mom when we got home. She thought we were crazy. Said maybe we'd been drugged, or maybe we'd had some kind of shared reaction to the weed, but it wasn't that. Whatever happened that night was real. We both experienced the same thing, at the same time, in the same sequence. You can't explain that away. To this day, we don't know what it was. My dad came closest to seeing it. Whatever he saw standing in the dark outside that tent, it wasn't human, and it wasn't natural. We've never heard another story like ours. We haven't been back to that campsite. We haven't been camping at all since that night. I don't think we ever will. This experience happened to me in 2020. The world was shutting down because of COVID, and everyone was cooped up in their homes. Being an avid backpacker and camper, I used COVID as an excuse to travel to different national parks and camp out in different places. One of those places was a creek in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado. Without giving away my identity or revealing too much personal information, let's just say something happened with my job back in 2019 that caused my reputation to kind of suffer a bit, and a good number of people despised me. I had to change apartments, get a new phone number, and eventually quit my job. The mistake I made caused a good number of people to lose a lot of money, so the shitstorm was expected. I just didn't know how far it would go. I was literally getting harassed by different random numbers for a while. Some texts were even threatening. I didn't know if they were from the same person or different people each time, and I considered the possibility that it was one person texting me from a bunch of different numbers. For a while it seemed to stop, and I was grateful that people seemed to lose interest or just move on. I wasn't working around this time. I was taking time to myself, hence another reason I was traveling around to different national parks. I drove the 3 hours to Rocky Mountain National Park, parked my truck, and started my hike up the trail to the creek. There was nobody else there. I'm sure that was because this was right when the lockdown started and people were taking it very seriously and not leaving their houses. That, and it was still wintertime. There was a thin sheet of snow on the ground, hard enough that it made that loud crunching sound with every footstep. After a little while, I made it to the creek. It wasn't frozen. It was still flowing. It was incredibly peaceful, and this was the detox I needed from the stresses of my life at the time. I found a place a little ways off the path to set up camp. After the tent was set up, I chopped up some wood, started a fire, and cooked some sausages on the stove. Then I started reading my book by the fire. After finishing a few chapters, it was getting dark out. Thank God for headlamps. I rolled a J and started smoking it. After a few hits, I felt my phone start going off. Honestly, apart from my family, I don't have a lot of people texting me, so I pulled out my phone from my jacket pocket and saw a bunch of texts from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was happening again. The texts were from a number with a 203 area code, which I looked up to be Connecticut. Whoever it was texted me saying, "How's the camping going, buddy?" The second text said, "It's beautiful out here." The third text said, "I see why you came up here." My default reaction was to respond, "Who is this?" If they had simply left it at, "How's the camping going?" I would have assumed it was a family member, but they were sending messages as if they were here with me. The weed had already entered my system and I was definitely high. This did not help my anxiety one bit. I felt extremely paranoid and started looking around me, standing up and doing a complete 360, looking in every direction out into the increasingly darkening woods. I went to get my P365 handgun from my bag just to make me feel safer. Usually I'd put a fire out before calling it a night, but as paranoid as I was feeling now, the thought of being in total darkness freaked me out. I went into the tent and crawled onto my sleeping bag. I stared at my phone, at the texts, waiting for a response that didn't come. Minutes dragged on and I just wanted the weed to wear off, honestly. I still had my headlamp on, so I tried to continue where I left off in my book, but between being high and my mind being stuck on those texts, I was kidding myself thinking I could read. I decided to just watch YouTube videos on my phone to pass the time. I didn't feel comfortable going to sleep just yet. I was watching some murder documentary on YouTube. I know a pretty interesting choice considering the setting, and when I least expected it, I got another text. A response to my question from before. Doesn't matter anymore. My heart started racing all over again. I replied back, "How did you know I'm camping?" Once again, no response. After this, the anxiety of the situation was weighing heavier and heavier on me. Was this a prank by a friend or family member? Or was this one of those people harassing me again? But if it was the latter, how would they know I was camping? That was the really uncomfortable part. I managed to kill an hour just watching videos on my phone. I noticed the glow from the fire outside was growing dimmer and dimmer as it died down to almost nothing. In the wintertime, without the sound of bugs, the woods are dead silent apart from wind. On a still night, the second a video would stop playing, the silence became deafening. Usually I'd embrace the peace, but my peace was completely disturbed because of those texts. Something then broke the silence. The unmistakable sound of human footsteps in the snow. They approached my tent until they were only maybe 6 feet from outside. Then the footsteps stopped. I had the gun tightly gripped in my hand, ready to take the safety off. There was suddenly a flash from outside. It looked like someone briefly shined a flashlight at the tent, or they took a picture. I heard the person walk away. Their footsteps slowly faded out to silence. And then, as I expected in the back of my mind, my phone dinged and vibrated. That number sent me a photo. The photo was of my tent. Following that was a text that said, "Have a good night's sleep." I can't explain it, but suddenly it felt like I completely snapped out of the remainder of my high. A bolt of adrenaline and something that felt almost like cold clarity overwhelmed me. I unzipped the tent and fired 2 rounds into the air. The sound of footsteps running away in the snow, not so far in the distance, told me it worked. It scared them off, but it also disturbed me even more, because that meant they had still been somewhere nearby, hiding, watching. I screamed a threat into the air and climbed back inside my tent. I believe it worked, because there were no more texts, no more footsteps. But I was awake for hours after the occurrence had completely woken me up. I felt like I'd drunk 3 cups of coffee. Eventually I did fall asleep, and waking up to morning sunlight was a tremendous relief. Whoever had followed me there was not ready for me to pull a gun. I definitely don't seem the type of person who would own one, and I know that was my first time firing that gun since buying it, and in fact my only time to this day. Whoever had been texting me, harassing me, and apparently stalking me, apparently decided to back off when they found out I was armed. Because almost 5 years later now, I haven't been bothered. Still, it was a nightmarish night, and I can't imagine how differently it might have turned out if I wasn't armed.